Hey everyone, welcome back to the Contractor Growth Network podcast. I'm Logan Shinholster, and today I am joined by a unique guest. His name is Marcus Filly. He's an entrepreneur. He runs a business that is all about functional bodybuilding. Now, Marcus is an incredible athlete. He's been to the CrossFit Games 6 times, and if you have never watched the CrossFit Games, these are people that are able to back squat 500 pounds and then turn around and run a 5-minute mile. So the fact that he was able to sustain this level of athleticism for that long of a time horizon is truly mind-blowing as somebody, me, who does CrossFit for the past 10 years. Now, Marcus also has turned his background into actually running an entire business that focuses on what is called functional bodybuilding. So I asked Marcus to join us on the podcast today to talk all about the overlap between health and fitness and becoming a better entrepreneur. I absolutely loved this episode and interview. Let's get into it. All right, Marcus. So for those in the audience that are listening that may not know who is Marcus Filly, can you give us your background, please?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a 39-year-old husband and father, and I've got 2 kids. And my backstory starts as just an athletic kid growing up who was great in a few sports and also great in the math and sciences. And so as I went through school, being a student athlete, I made my way into collegiate sports. I played Division I soccer at UC Berkeley, was a pre-med student there, and got exposure to uh, a lot of strength, sports, health science while I was at Berkeley with this intention of going into medicine. But I combined that with my passion for sport, which ultimately turned into a passion for fitness because I found out in college through the introduction to collegiate strength and conditioning how much I loved training for sport rather than the sport itself. So I kind of looked to find a way to combine my passion for health, fitness, medical sciences into a career. And I went to medical school at The Ohio State University for a year. And after a year, I decided to step away and kind of go and try and pursue a dream in the fitness industry. And then my time in the fitness industry has been essentially the last 15 years, dabbling in all types of things, growing my own businesses, promoting the brand of CrossFit for many years, being an athlete in the sport of CrossFit, a coach, a gym owner, an online business owner, and now somebody who just deeply wants to help people make sustainable and long-term changes to their health and fitness so that they can live more fulfilling lives.
The way that I found you, Marcus, was, I've followed you on Instagram for now years. And I love everything you put out, but I've done CrossFit on and off for the most part, mostly on for the greater part of the past 10 years. You went to the CrossFit Games. Can you talk a bit about what it takes? Because on TV, you look at it, and it's like watching the Olympics where you're like, well, they're fast, but I don't know how much faster they are than me. Can you talk a bit about what it really takes as an athlete to make it to the CrossFit Games?
Sure, yeah. If the listener is familiar with CrossFit because they've done CrossFit, and you've done it at like an affiliate or one of the gyms, a CrossFit gym, what's interesting is you'll go into a CrossFit gym and there'll be some athletes in there that have standout, skills and strengths and abilities. And back when I coached at a CrossFit gym and I trained at a CrossFit gym, there were members that could do many of the things that I did, to a very close and in some cases like a superior level. But there was rarely somebody that could do 2 things to the same degree or level, or um, and certainly not many people that could do 3 or more things, and then 0 people that could do high level skills, strength, and capabilities in CrossFit across 12 workouts within 2.5 days. So being a CrossFit competitor was about becoming elite at every discipline that CrossFit offered. So you couldn't have holes in your game. You couldn't be strong but not have good endurance. You just wouldn't, you wouldn't make it through the qualification process. So you had to have an elite level at every stage of training. You needed to not, your relative weaknesses had to be still superior to 99.9% of people out there doing CrossFit. And then you had to have a very robust ability, capacity to recover, because the the sport was not just about one performance, how well can you do. It was about how well could you perform 12 events over the span of 2.5, 3 days, 6 to 12 events rather, which is like, telling somebody like, okay, you're going to go run your first marathon and you want to get a good time. All right, cool. You check that box. Now you want to go run your first marathon and you want to beat your last time. And eventually you want to get your marathon time under 3 hours. That's a high level. Not many people do a sub 3 hour marathon. Okay, now that you've done a sub 3 hour marathon, let's try and do 3 days in a row of a sub 3 hour marathon. And that just, each step of that becomes, it requires longer time preparation, so more and more years accumulated, and a higher volume of training time on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, so that you can just tolerate, like when it comes time to do the event, your body's so used to doing that much more that it feels less, less of a full, a full effort of everything that you have, that you can't recover from. And what that ended up looking like in practical terms was, you know 3 to 4 hours a day of pretty hard training, plus another 2 to 3 hours of, focused recovery, like just like time spent focusing on how do I heal and recover from that work. And it was 5 to 6 days a week of that, for my career was like 8 years long.
There's a ton of overlap between sports and business. So I wanted to know from Marcus, how has his sports background translated into his own entrepreneur journey?
It's the idea that if you stretch your time horizon out long enough, that you can accomplish just like remarkable things. I was extremely engaged and inspired and enthusiastic about the sport, but the process of getting better physically was something that really lit me up, and that was my true passion. And I started at a time or an age where I didn't feel like I had pressure to like get anywhere at any time, soon. It was like the best part of this was like, I'm going to be doing this for the next, 5 years. And if in 5 years I'm really, I'm continuing to get better, like that's what is a win for me. So I kind of, within that longer time horizon, I had short-term goals and things that I tried to push myself to do. And that certainly helps. However, knowing that I had time to do something, or that, this was going to be a long process, uh, gave me enough like like space to really develop into the athlete that I could be. And I I had this, like the culmination of my career in 2016 at the last CrossFit Games that I competed at. My placement was very good, but what I felt more than my placement was like I just delivered the best package of Marcus as an athlete on the competition floor that I've ever done in my entire career. And it's because of the last really 5 years of work to build to this point that I could even have a chance to do that. And so that's sort of like much of the way that all my, like the true success in business has come. It's like, you know, yeah, you want to make sales. Yeah, you want to push revenue. Yeah, you want to have, your metrics climbing, and everyone would love to hockey stick their business growth. However, it's like if you can just be slow and steady and make those 1% improvements on a routine cadence, then gosh, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you stand to have something that is really valuable, a lot of enterprise value. And, and the solidity or the stability of, hey, a business that can operate, over the long term, rather than something that was just great for a year and then burned out.
Yeah, because I know like a lot of it in the CrossFit world, I mean, every day is intense. So I guess for you, now that you have pivoted away from CrossFit, you still have a lot of the same movement. So it's a lot of similar maybe outcomes, but it's a different methodology. So can you talk a bit more about what is functional bodybuilding compared to what we all see on TV as CrossFit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, CrossFit um, as a method was founded on some core principles. One of which is the constant variance principle. Do something new each time that you train. To a certain extent, not like forever, like they repeat workouts from time to time, but take a core set of, let's say it's 50 exercises, and put them together in unique combinations each day. So there's a variance component. There's a functional component. So they define functional a particular way, but essentially, the reputation is like you're doing movements that show up in life. You're doing compound exercises, not isolation movements. So think pull up, not bicep curl. Right. So we got the variance. We're going to constantly vary these functional movements, and we're going to perform them at the highest intensity possible. And so the intensity portion of the CrossFit method and charter is, if you're not doing it at the highest intensity, then I would argue you're not doing CrossFit, right? Someone would say like, oh, you're just doing CrossFit, Marcus. It's like, well, actually, no, because CrossFit has never said perform X thing at a percentage of your maximum. They always say perform this for your best effort possible today. Do 21:15:9 of thrusters and pull-ups as fast as you can. It wasn't like, hey, it's March 23rd and today we're doing 21:15:9 of thrusters and pull-ups, and I want you to go at kind of a 7 out of 10 effort. That's not part of the method. Now, I loved the variance component of CrossFit to a degree, right? I love the functional movement component of CrossFit. Thanks to my experience in CrossFit, I learned how to do muscle ups. I learned how to walk on my hands. I learned how to do pistols. I learned how to snatch, clean and jerk, and perform all of the other power lifts that I had done for years prior to that with better technique, better form. I was exploring movement. And I love the high intensity aspect of it too, in certain doses, because the truest high intensity that was ever done in my career was the CrossFit Games or CrossFit competition. If I did the same level of intensity at the CrossFit Games every day of the year, I would be obliterated as like a person. Like limbs would literally start to fall off and break. So now bringing that down into the general population, Gen Pop. So not athletes that are competing in the pinnacle of the sport, not your NFL, starting, roster, more of like your pickup flag football team on the weekend of people who have real jobs and aren't training and maybe, don't have the best fitness and nutrition and sleep and you name it. That is what I had to start thinking about when it came to CrossFit, was like, how do I distill these principles into something that works for me for the long haul if I'm not going to be competing, and really works for a lot of people. And what was interesting was that in the affiliate, the CrossFit gym around the world, you saw a lot of good coaches taking CrossFit and scaling it, because this is also part of the charters, like it's universally scalable, but they were scaling it in a way which was leveraging training principles that were not technically CrossFit, but they were just ways of, hey, how do I make this more accessible and help people progress and feel good and get stronger? And you started seeing coaches implement more bodybuilding work and strength training principles with lifting prescriptions that were not go for a max every day. And they were doing, like, as we got better in the sport, we realized that there's methods that can translate down into training for these movements and for fitness, and people were doing them in the affiliates. So it was like this was happening already. Best practices were not come in, do the workout, um, you know, as fast as you can and then leave. It was come in, do some focused mobility, do some structured strength training, maybe do some accessory strength training, then do a conditioning workout that's like a Metcon, but it's got some. So it was all happening. And truthfully, I was working in the trenches for a number of years, adapting, the like the original CrossFit methods that I saw on CrossFit.com. And I was adapting it for my audience and giving people strength and conditioning programs that had bodybuilding and CrossFit mixed together. And eventually that is what I do today. Is I call it functional bodybuilding, and it's really a hybrid of, CrossFit methods, bodybuilding methods, strength and conditioning principles that have been tried and true for decades that I used when I was in college as a D1 athlete. And it's like, yeah, we're doing it all together with the idea that the highest level of intensity that you can do on any given thing is not necessary to see improvement, and it can be counterproductive to long-term sustainable health, fitness, and longevity. And when it came, time for me to quit my career or retire, I realized that that's what mattered. I didn't need to win points this year or this weekend in the sport. I needed to feel awesome. I needed to show up for my family. I needed to be able to focus on my business, and I didn't want to feel like I had just been punched in the gut last, at 6 a.m. in the morning at my workout, and then kind of drag myself to my desk and try and figure out how to do my life.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about when you're talking about all this and you're describing is I'm thinking back to like my business journey, but also my CrossFit journey, where when you're describing Fran, which for everyone out there is that workout he's talking about, the 21-15-9. Every time I've done that workout, I haven't done it in years because I've like kind of put my ego to the side, but like I then spend 20 minutes waiting around to then throw up. So it's like and it happens every single time. And I'm at this place now where I'm like, there's no way that like I would ever do that workout before work, because then I'm coming into work with all of that. But with business, it's a lot of that where your journey of this is all, you come out of the gates super hot, super fast. You're trying to do everything all at once in business, really just like not knowing how reckless it can be. And then as you mature, you start to realize, like, let's slow it down. We can go intense on certain things, but there's a lot of things that we don't need to go 150% every single day. And if we just slow it down, we're actually going to be able to go a lot further, a lot longer, versus just trying to like, throw caution to the wind and see what can come of it if we just go really hard for 75 days.
Somebody who's getting into business or somebody who's getting into fitness, who listens to the narrative that you got to go hard, super hard, if you want to get anywhere. If you want to break through, you got to just go full, like you got to 10x everything. You got to Grant Cardone it. You got to, you got to go high intensity, like every day. You 75 hard, that not 75, 365 hard. Like, if somebody's caught up in that narrative, which it's easy to get caught up in and hear people say that, then it's no fault to them for just following through, because that's what they believe is true. It's like we're here to educate people that there's a different way of thinking about it. And it's like the extended time horizon, how is this going to play out over a decade, not just over months. And then once people hear that, help them align to a systematic approach to how to do this. That's not to say you shouldn't 10x something. It's like, yeah, like even if you're playing the long game and your marketing is just not working, like 10xing your marketing is a great strategy to start to figure out what can work, what sticks, and what's actually landing for your audience. If you just keep putting out one Instagram post every 3 weeks and you're like, man, my Instagram's not growing, it's like, that's not playing the sustainable long game. That's just bad business practice, but waking up and doing 20-hour days for, 75 days in a row, barely sleeping, not taking care of yourself physically, not eating well, not having relationships, like you might make it pretty far in 75 days with your business, but then the next 75 days, you might pretty much burn out and not produce anything. And all of that, at the end of those 150 cumulative days, the person who only worked a 12 or 14-hour day is way surpassing you because they put in 150 consecutive days, whereas you put in 75 and then fell off.
So while we can all agree that there's a lot of overlap between fitness and running a strong business, I actually wanted to know from Marcus, what is that direct correlation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, the biggest aspect of it, and I could speak to like the health benefits and the energy benefits and the mental clarity, which I'm happy to talk about. But fitness is, and building a strong, muscular body. And I'm not talking like we're building muscle to like look a particular way. Muscle is a proxy for like, just sort of the strength and effort and quality of your training and the consistency. It's like the person who has more muscle, exogenous hormones and like really banned substances aside, like if we're all playing on a level playing field and I see this person has more muscle than the next person and they're both strength training, then I'm like, yes, this person has maybe they have a more superior program, but more likely they're just working harder. They're bringing more effort, they're more consistent, they're doing more of the right things, and the character and the strength of mind, spirit, and body that goes with that is is remarkable. I mean, it's why people who are, maybe have a why you see a lot of people in business, reference their sports background or their upbringing in athletics as like it gave me, you know, it taught me work ethic. It taught me like it teaches work ethic. It teaches also the confidence that comes from taking on a hard pursuit physically and being successful and seeing that the only way I can make it to this physical pursuit is through repeated consistent efforts. Like nobody builds a great physique in 3 months. They build it over a lifetime. And so to me, that is really where fitness and being, and the traits from fitness carry over into entrepreneurship so much is like when you commit yourself to your physical health and your physical fitness, you're building traits that have direct carryover to what you do as an entrepreneur. Um, and then with all that said, yes, I started out by saying like, well, when you move your body and you're expending more energy through physical, exertion, there is, hormonal benefits. There's neurotransmitter benefits. Like people who exercise are less depressed. Well, a less depressed CEO is somebody who's probably going to be able to show up and be better at engaging with other people in the company and leading, right? If they're depressed or if they have, suppressed serotonin levels or dopamine levels in their brain, like they're not as effective as, leaders. Of course, like the cardiorespiratory and the, other health benefits, you're going to have a translation to likely fewer sick days in your year. So it's like, hey, how did your year go as an entrepreneur? I know people that have like chronic infections. They are just sick all the time and they might miss 8 weeks a year being ill or just have 8 to 12 weeks a year where they just can't perform at their best cuz they're just foggy and mentally, like just mental fog from being sick. And if that's a quarter to, a sixth of your entire calendar year, and that happens year after year, you're falling behind for somebody who, you know, doesn't, the people that say like, I never get sick. Well, that's not I mean, that's not always just a random occurrence. If you strengthen your immune system through positive health behaviors, that can absolutely, by eating well, that's the number one thing that you can do to improve your immune function and resilience, but also movement, cardiorespiratory, fitness, strength training, all these things can, so long as you don't push it so hard that you're like beating down your immune system. Another reason why going hard, super hard in the gym all the time can be can be problematic because then you're now more vulnerable to illness. So it's like get more quality, like days of the year back by not being sick, have better mental acuity and like emotional, psychological well being where you feel confident and you don't feel like, because a depressed individual is somebody who is going to like have greater, like maybe higher levels of anxiety and more doubt and fear and or doubt in themselves. And you want to be like in a position where I'm confident, I move towards the fear because I believe I can take it on, because business is scary, it's uncertain, right? I don't want to be, I want to feel good each day. I don't want to feel hungover and sick, right? And all of that is like coming from good health and wellness behaviors. And you're like, well, I don't need all that stuff. I'm just going to like grind it out for 20 hours a day, and I'm just going to grind and grind and grind. It's like your 20 hours are less effective than my 10 hours, because I am sharp. I'm never sick. I can get way more done in a short amount of time. And it happens to be because I train my body into physical health. Plus, all the years of training have given me the traits and the confidence on how to stick to a plan, how to follow through, how to be disciplined. And it's like, okay, you're winning. And you can have people who are great entrepreneurs who are not in shape and who are, they don't take their health seriously. But take Mr. Beast as a great example. It's like, here's a guy who built this mega empire. And, it was like maybe 18 months ago, he was like, I realized that I was like basically fat and out of shape. I like had no muscle. And did he have a successful business at the time? Absolutely. The biggest, social media like business in the world, right? But then he's like, I'm going to start getting in shape. It's like fast forward 18 months, ask him like, are you a better entrepreneur than you were when you were out of shape? It's relative improvements upon what you already bring to the table. So you might be killing it out there and you're like, I don't care. I don't focus on my diet. I barely work out and I'm just crushing it. It's like, imagine what you could do if you did. Like you could be, untouchable.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like this is already hard enough as it is. Like entrepreneurship, it's an infinite game. There's no end. You finally made it. There's no rules, so you're kind of just figuring it out as you go. So why make it harder on yourself than it already is? Because you're gonna mess up. You're gonna fail. Don't do it where every day at 2 o'clock you're ready for a nap because you put the wrong stuff into your body. And one of the things that you talked about, I heard before, was just with this idea of like fitness, like where you were talking about, well, just because you go and just burn off the calories on the treadmill, that's not the same as going and actually like building muscle mass. So when it comes to the actual exercises and what kind of workouts you're doing, that also makes an impact into how you're showing up. So can you talk a bit about, like, it was a big unlock for me when you were discussing like the more muscle mass you have, the better off you're going to be as a whole. So can you talk a bit about that?
I guess the thesis statement here is, you know, when you go to the gym and you train, there should be there should be a purpose behind it. Training is not the same as just going to burn calories, which is unfortunately what the health and fitness and the diet culture has fed to a lot of people. It's like, the only reason to engage in fitness is to like burn calories so that you can lose weight. And while there's some truth to that underlying like the whole method and system of like thinking that I'm talking about, what really should be the case is that, when you step in the gym, you should have a purpose of getting stronger, building muscle, or improving your cardiovascular fitness or your cardio measurably. Like, did you increase the weight on the bar? Did you grow muscle? Did you stimulate muscle growth? And did you actually push your VO2 max, which is a term people have heard, but it's generally a measurement of your like cardiorespiratory capacity. Did you move your VO2 max up? And if you're not doing one of those things, then you're just in there kind of manufacturing movements and workouts and combinations to burn calories. And the problem with the calorie burn concept is that in a great scenario, like, and I'm talking about for most people, a good to great scenario is 5 days a week in the gym for an hour. That's 5 hours of close to whatever it is, 150 hours in a week that exist. So it's a fraction of the time that you exist is in the gym. So there's all these other hours where your body is burning energy. And we want to maximize how much energy you burn in the 145 hours that you're not in the gym, rather than think about how do I maximize the energy that I burn in the 5 hours that I'm in the gym. And the way that you maximize the total energy that you burn throughout a week is by having more muscle, being a more lean individual, eating better quality food, and having more activity that you do that's not gym related. So people who walk 10,000 steps a day and work out 3 times a week have a much better chance at losing body fat than the person who works out 5 times a week really hard, but only walks 2 to 4,000 steps a day. And so it's like, how do we change this thought process? So it's go into the gym, have structured training to build strength, to build muscle, to build your VO2 max, focus on that, bring enough effort to move the needle on these health and fitness metrics, and then the rest of your day get in a little bit more activity, walk more, drive less, sit less, eat more high quality food, which also burns more calories and impacts your calorie intake. So that is kind of like the primary, model that I want people to try and shift their thinking to. And if you do that, you think when you leave the gym, you used to equate leaving the gym with a good sweat as a sign of success. Like, oh, I got a good sweat and I burned a lot of calories. I crushed the cardio today. I'm not saying that getting on the elliptical and doing treadmill is not beneficial. It is, absolutely. I want you getting that in, but I want you also spending the time in the gym pushing against resistance, getting weights into your hands, making them heavier than last time, building that muscle, because a muscular, lean frame is one that's going to burn more energy in the other 23 hours of your day than one that did a ton of cardio sweat and then, is kind of this little smoldering, slow burn fire for the rest of the day.
To me, it seems like a lot of the health and fitness programs out there are really focused on people that spend an hour in the gym and then just work a desk job all day. So I want to know from Marcus, with contractors who are typically on their feet for 8 to 10 hours a day, what sort of training and exercise programs and thought processes should they be focusing on?
Great question, and something that I haven't thought about a lot. However, now it just seems so clear to me that if you're in that situation, your activity level is quite high already, and you should absolutely not be thinking about how do I leverage time in the gym to burn more energy and burn more calories. If I'm in that situation, then the biggest levers that you're going to be able to pull in order to improve your health and fitness outcomes, or maybe it's your body composition, maybe you just want to look good. And I hate to throw out this stereotype, but I'm thinking of, people working on a job site, contractors or laborers that are just overweight despite how much movement that they're doing. You got, somebody who's very overweight, but here they are moving for 8 hours a day, on the job site. It's like, it doesn't compute. Well, what are the things that they're potentially missing? Well, number one, I would think that jobs like that are, because of, there's a lot of repeated tasks, but there is the physical toll that takes on a body over the years is a lot. And so the work that you would do in the gym is about building great functional strength. So strength combined with, we term it mobility, or like the ability to move freely under control through large ranges of motion of all of your joints. Somebody who's working a contracting job, or is, moving a lot on the site for 8 to 10 hours. And then I bring them into the gym and I say, okay, let's do a functional assessment. And they can't touch their toes because they have really tight hamstrings or they have poor hip mechanics. That screams to me real problems. that person has a high likelihood of getting injured on the job site because they lack functional strength and range in their hips. And we could do that for their entire body. Your career, last thing you want is to go on to it has to go on to disability because you hurt your back or you hurt your shoulder. So the time spent in the gym is about getting strong through big ranges of motion, doing deep squats, learning how to do an RDL well, where you lengthen the muscles along the back of your legs, learning how to do, full range of motion pull-ups and bench presses to like open up your shoulders and to create health and strength in your upper back. Those types of things would be extremely valuable, and they would make the movements that you're doing on the job feel even more easeful and effortless, because now what you've done in the gym has kind of prepared you for anything that you might do there. And then the second biggest thing is uh, nutrition, because it is so easy to out eat your training. Like you can't out train or out work on the job site a bad diet. It's so remarkable when people start to actually investigate these things, how easy it is to just like, yeah, I'm moving 10 hours a day, I burn a ton of calories, and I'm still putting on body fat. It's like, because if you go, and I'm not saying that this is the mistake people are making, but if we go to the extreme, you can go to a drive-through to get breakfast or lunch at a fast food joint. You can order a standard meal on the menu, like with maybe the larger sizes. You can get a large soft drink, and then you can throw in like one of the desserts, and you could easily put away 2,500 calories in one sitting and it not even really feel like that was a big meal. Whereas if you learned a little bit about nutrition, you started to prioritize bringing your own lunch with the right foods in it, or you just started to make simple food swaps, you could suddenly see somebody who's putting in all the energy, or sorry, outputting all the energy at their work. Plus, they're doing the functional strength stuff 3 to 4 times a week for like an hour. And then they make those switches on their food, and suddenly just body fat and weight just melts off of them, which is great for their health and longevity. They're going to improve all their health markers. They're not going to have metabolic syndrome, and they're not going to be in the overweight obese category. Their blood pressure, their insulin sensitivity, their diabetes markers, all those things are going to go way down in a positive direction. But they're also going to feel confident because they're going to start looking better and feeling like, oh, I'm not I'm not carrying around this extra, amount of weight around my midsection, around my back, or my love handles. And it wasn't like there's just such a low hanging fruit there to clean up nutrition when you're already somebody who's moving a ton. It's like when I see somebody who moves a lot and is overweight, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we just pull like a nutrition lever. This thing is going to go crazy. Whereas you got people who sit all day, they get less than 2,000 steps a day, and they only are training 3 days a week. It's like they don't have a lot of, they're not burning a lot. So to like make a big nutrition shift and see a huge change is going to be pretty hard, because they don't have that like added activity level that somebody who's working a manual labor job does.
Marcus is huge on nutrition. So I asked him, what are some of those nutritional levers that we can pull that makes a big impact into getting in better shape and better business shape?
Yeah, well, when it comes to food and it comes to getting started, it's a science of addition, not subtraction, in my opinion, or it's a mathematical kind of equation of more addition rather than subtraction. There's too much diet culture and nutrition stuff out there that says stop eating this, stop eating that, stop eating this, stop eating that. And it's a hard way to get people started, because people have routines, they have habits, and you take it away and man, it's like I don't want to give that up right now. That feels good to me, or maybe it doesn't feel good, but it's all I know, and I'm addicted to it. There's some biological, psychological response to it. Hey, don't take away my thing. So adding something is a great way to indirectly get people to lessen something, right? And just take this like very simple example. It's like, hey, if you want to you want to have it, you really want to have a donut. Okay. If you said, okay, have the donut, but first I want you to have these 3 apples. Just eat these 3 apples, and pick any apple you like, but you got to eat 3 of them. They're kind of substantial. It's like, okay, eat the 3 apples. Okay, now go have whatever donut you want. And maybe the first time they go eat the whole donut. Do it every day. Okay, have 2 pieces of fruit, and then go eat the donut. And pretty soon they're just like, man, I'm just kind of full. Like I just ate a bunch of apples and I drank this, water or this diet beverage or whatever, something to fill them up that's no calories. They're like, I don't really want the donut. I'm only going to have a little bite of it. That's just a very simple example of this. But where we try, and that's not the first place we start. The place that we start with people is like, hey, start your meal with protein, or make sure that each meal has some protein in it. And we have to teach people what that looks like. What does it look like to get, you threw out 30 to 40, it could be even as much as 50 grams, but what does it look like to get 30 to 50 grams of protein at every meal, starting with breakfast each day? Because people who are in this cycle of like overeating, they tend to, this is very common, they tend to be breakfast skippers. They eat a little later in the morning, or they just start their day with like an energy drink or a coffee and, maybe a pastry or something like that. Not a substantial meal, but a decent, some calories. And then they get to lunch, they have a big meal because now they're really hungry because they haven't eaten anything since dinner last night. Usually they just drank a bunch of caffeine and sugar. And then by the time they work the rest of the day and then they get home, they're also starving. Maybe they have a alcoholic beverage, and then it goes into eating, and then they have some snacks after dinner, and then they just load up on a lot of food and calories at night, which then makes them wake up the next morning feeling like, I'm not full. I just need to I need a cigarette and a coffee and I'm good to go. And then they get to, to the next stage, and it's a vicious cycle. So we say, okay, you got to get protein into your system early in the day. So we start with you got to have breakfast. It's got to be 30 to 50 grams of protein. What does that look like? What the hell is that? I don't know. Just have a protein shake if you want to start with. Like, wake up, instead of having just coffee or just the energy drink, have a, protein shake with 2 scoops of protein and water or milk. That's fine. Maybe we graduate them over time to, hey, have 2 hard-boiled eggs and, a couple strips of bacon and some chicken. Or you have a big old bowl of, yogurt, Greek yogurt with some protein mixed into it. Or you start to like teach, you could have, a whole 2 cups of egg whites scrambled together with a little bit of cheese that you like. Boom. And they start to figure out, hey, I can have 50 grams of protein this way. Now, protein is where we start because protein is such a valuable macronutrient for everybody, but somebody who's just getting into the dieting or nutrition world. Number one, because it's highly satiating. It makes you feel full. If you eat equal amounts of protein and equal amounts of fat and equal amounts of carbs, generally the protein is always going to fill you up more. It takes a little bit longer to digest. It sends signals once it's in your digestive system back to your brain through hormones, through neurotransmitters. Hey, I'm full. You don't need to eat more. And it will help you sustain that fullness and that energy for longer. So you're like, no, it's not like an hour later where you're like, I need some more, right? It's like everyone's had the experience. Like, I have a bite of a candy bar, I have a sugary drink. In an hour, I need something else, and then you need something else. You need something else. Protein helps you sustain and feel, full for longer. Number 2, protein, when you ingest protein, enough of it, let's say 50 grams of protein, you eat that, it starts building muscle, right? Like, that is it. It's having enough protein in your bloodstream. It gets broken down into amino acids. Once you have enough amino acids in your bloodstream, your body kicks on this thing called protein synthesis, muscle protein synthesis. That's building muscle. And, if you're doing that throughout your day, having protein at each meal, then guess what? You're building the muscle tissue that you want to have, making it more active so that you're burning more calories and so that you're burning more calories at rest. So we want protein for its muscle building potential, for its satiation, helps to reduce cravings later in the day, right? And the other thing that's kind of nuanced is like, when you eat protein, because of the way protein is structured as a molecule, it's like costly to break it down, right? You have to like, it's like if the analogy would be like, we're on the contractor example. It's like if you had to go dig a hole to plant the tree in the landscaping project and it was soft soil, you would just, it'd be an easy hole to dig. You're hoping that it's a soft soil, not clay, like concrete, like you're going to have to really work your ass off. Protein is kind of like the clay concrete. When you eat protein, your body has to work hard to break it down and to get energy out of it. You're going to get the energy out of it, but you're going to have to put in a little bit more than if you eat the carbohydrate, which is more like the soft soil, where it's like I just put this in and it goes right into my body without much effort, and I get all the calories from it. Whereas the protein, I only got a portion of the calories from it because I had to work so hard to get it out. So it's like if you're going to choose a food to eat protein so that you're putting in a little bit more energy to get the same thing out. And so we got fullness, we've got muscle building, and then we've got this sort of like the energy cost of breaking it down. And so if that's where I start with people, it's like, hey, let's just put in the protein at each of your meals, prioritize the first meal of the day so that you can start your day and you can break this cycle of getting to dinner and into the late night of snacking where it's so easy for people to just consume thousands of calories without even really thinking about it. And this is one habit that starts to break that cycle, and one attention of like, I'm going to add this to every meal. Yeah, you can go have your whatever, but make sure you add in your 50 grams of protein to each meal. And they're like, what does that look like? It's like, okay, let's just do a quick Google search. Go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT, I need 40 grams of protein. Give me a list of 20 things that I can have. Boom, you're done. Like you have it. You're like, oh, Greek yogurt, protein shake, chicken breast, right? Like pulled pork, like whatever. Like you can think of a bunch of different examples, but it's a great place to start. And then over time, we can even make that better with other additions, and eventually some swaps or subtractions of things that are no longer serving you. And you're like, gosh, I'm still eating that donut every day. I don't even need that anymore. What's like a better option? I'm going to start going with this thing.
All this sounds great, but where does rest and recovery come into the quality of your day to day life?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think for the rest and recovery part of this, I don't imagine that this group that we're speaking to wants to start to like go through the added steps of doing, soft tissue work and mobility and, getting into all the biohacking and things like that. But the best free resource that we have for recovery is your sleep. And I think it's important to take it one step further than just like, we got to get sleep. It's like, we got to improve the quality of our sleep first before we have to at least address that there's a quality and a quantity issue going on with sleep. People that are not giving themselves enough time to sleep, that is something that we do want to address. But in the same way we were talking about like food, it's like, the addition versus subtraction thing. It's like when you tell somebody, hey, you got to go sleep more, what are you doing? You're taking away waking hours from them. Like, you tell me to go to bed at 8, but from 8 to 10 is like when I have like the most fulfillment in my day. I get to hang out with my wife. I get to hang out with my husband. I get to hang out with my kid. I get to watch my show, whatever they do. And they're like, I'm not feeling my best physically and my health isn't the best. But they can't see the benefit. They can't imagine what the benefit will look like with those 2 extra hours of sleep. All they know right now is that you just took away an hour of their best hours of the day where they get to mentally check out and watch Netflix. So I start with like talking about quality. It's like, okay, well, I don't want to take away that thing, but I want to start you on a path towards getting better quality sleep so that if you're only getting 6 hours, it's like, the best 6 hours you can get. And so I might start with, and the things that increase sleep quality that people have the ability to change is, you already mentioned it, like alcohol intake. So again, that could be something where you like don't want to tell somebody to stop drinking alcohol because that's like their favorite part of the day is their, whatever. It's like, but if they're coming home and they're having 3 glasses of wine or 3 beers, you say, hey, what if we like cut that down to like 2 or 1 during the Monday through Friday, or the, Sunday through Thursday, and then yeah, go back to your normal weekend amount. But it's like, give them a chance to feel what higher quality sleep looks like. Or you're like, you get them bought in on like, hey, during these 4 work nights of the week, just cut out the booze. Then let's try and maximize your sleep quality. Getting rid of booze is going to vastly improve the quality of people's sleep. The second thing that's going to vastly improve the quality of people's sleep is cutting their eating window a little bit further away from sleep time. So if bedtime is going to be 10 p.m., then stop eating at 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. if possible, and give yourself a 2 to 3 hour buffer between when you fall asleep. And so that's the food that you've just had can pass, a big portion of your digestive system. And now you don't have a lot of like elevated heart rate and things where you're like trying to digest food and there's a lot going on that can disrupt the quality of your sleep. So those are 2 things that you can start to just move. It's like, hey, you don't have to do this, you don't have to cut it out completely, but just move the time windows, or maybe lessen the quantity of alcohol here and, keep it over here.
We all know that change can be difficult. So, ask Marcus, if you were just getting started, or maybe getting started for the 12th time on this fitness journey, where should you start to make sure that you're actually sustainable with what you're doing?
It's this fine line between like, I value things like 75 hard because in some respects, because it's it's difficult for people to get excited about doing like the bare minimum. It's like, I know that if somebody is not working out and they're only walking 3,000 steps a day, that if they just focused on committing to moving 8,000 steps a day, no exercise on top of that, no structured workouts, they would get better. But you tell somebody to do that and they're like, ugh, like, I'm so bad. Like, I'm so bad off that like, that's the only thing I'm like, it's like, it's not even enough to get them motivated to start. Whereas if they're like, hey, do the 75 hard thing, they're like, yeah, I'm going to really crush this thing, and it gets them fired up to go, then there's value in it. So I'm always striking this balance between like, what's the minimal effective dose and what's a dose that gets somebody kind of like feeling like, yeah, I'm going to move the needle. Because if you start walking 8,000 steps a day, that's going to make you better, but it's going to be a slow change. Whereas if you go 75 hard after day 20, you might be seeing some like pretty substantial results because you went from doing nothing to doing 2 45-minute workouts a day, being outdoors for 45 minutes a day, doing all the like, not, doing something nutritionally like that of course it's going to move the needle. The question is whether that's sustainable. That's the other dark side of 75 hard. So as far as getting started, I say 3 days a week of resistance training. Like, let's try and make room for that. Get a gym membership, go in, spend the money on a personal trainer to just walk you through the basics. Or if you've done some training in the past, you feel comfortable with weights, join an online, like get an online training program that you can follow with an app on your phone, like the one that we offer. There's so many good programs out there that have really good software and tech where you can more or less like guide yourself through a pretty high quality fitness program now without having to pay too much money. Or, get a few kettlebells or dumbbells for the garage and just commit to a routine where you get out there, 3 days a week and you're lifting those things, again, following whatever program that you want to get yourself access to. Then I love the concept of daily movement. So this like 75 hard where it's like do a 45-minute workout every day. It doesn't have to be weights and something high intensity. It's just, you got to like even going for a walk or putting on a weighted pack. I think that is just an absolute great strategy. And for people, I say walking 45 minutes a day, like if you could do it uninterrupted, great. If you just need to break it up into 15-minute walks, also great. And to give that person some sort of motivation, it's like, oh, we're just walking. It's like, put a weighted pack on. Literally get yourself a 20 to 30 pound, 40-pound backpack or weight vest or some type of weighted thing, put it on your body, and that's going to elevate your intensity of this very simple thing called walking. And then add in the protein at breakfast and try and get 30 to 50 grams of protein at every meal each day. Make that the first part of your meal that you eat. And then let's just start there for, a month. And we'll talk about how you're feeling at that point. And if you are compliant with that 90% of the time, meaning 90% of days you do all those things, I can almost guarantee that at day 30, you're going to be like, cool, what's next? I'm ready for something more.
If you enjoyed that episode with Marcus Philly and you want to learn more about him and functional bodybuilding, we'll go ahead and put his information down below in either the show notes or the YouTube video to check him out. I will say the more that you are exposed to his own Instagram account, the more that he will give you little tips and tricks that are actually quite easy to follow throughout your day that just make you a better, healthier person. So check it out in the show notes because we're all about making sure that we are functioning the best versions of ourselves in business holistically. We'll see you next time.